Today at the National Press Club, the Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenburg, the day after handing down his second budget, a vastly different economic blueprint than he'd ever have imagined delivering, he'll continue his sell of the federal government's plan to get the nation out of a recession. Josh Frydenburg with today's National Press Club address.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia and today's Westpac address. My name is Sabra Lane. I am the club's president. I'm also the presenter of the ABC radio program AM. Today's guest is the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenburg. Thank you. Welcome. This is your post-budget traditional speech, although we're not at the traditional location. We thank you for coming down to the club today. If you're following us online, you'll find us on Twitter. Our user handle is @PressClubAUST. Everybody, please join me in welcoming the Federal Treasurer, Josh Frydenburg.
Well, thank you very much, Sabra, and can I first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Can I also acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues in the room and start with Matthias Corman. Matthias has been a tower of strength as Australia's Finance Minister. I don't think this country has seen a finer Finance Minister than Matthias Corman. It's been my great pleasure to work with him on the ERC first as Assistant Treasurer and now as the Treasurer. His work on the ERC has helped us get the financial firepower that was needed to respond to this crisis. He was always very good at saying no. This year he's been much better at saying yes. But Matthias, a very, very big thank you. Thank you very much. Can I also acknowledge Assistant Ministers Hume, who's doing a wonderful job in superannuation. There's some significant reforms in this budget, and Assistant Minister Morton, thank you for being here. Can I also acknowledge the Secretary of the Treasury, Dr. Stephen Kennedy, again somebody whose professionalism and capacity as the Secretary of the Treasury has been invaluable through this crisis, not just in the preparation of this budget, but in the many months leading up. A person who's respected by both sides for his frank and fearless advice, and his contribution in this budget has been as significant as anyone. So too with Rosemary Huxtable. Can I also acknowledge her as the Secretary of Finance and the other senior secretaries I can see in the room, Francis Adamson, Mike Pizzullo and others. Thank you for your service to the country. Ladies and gentlemen, in last night's budget, I announced the Morrison government's plan to rebuild the economy, to create more jobs and to secure Australia's economic future. COVID-19 is primarily a health crisis which has created an economic crisis like none other. Unlike the Australian recessions of the early 1980s and 1990s, this pandemic has created both a supply side and a demand side shock, driving a sharper and a deeper economic downturn. And our economic toolkit has been constrained, with monetary policy having less room to move, with the cash rate at a relatively low rate entering into this crisis. COVID-19 has seen the Australian economy go into recession for the first time in almost 30 years. Tragically, many Australian lives have been lost, and many Australian jobs and Australian livelihoods have been lost too. In response, the Morrison government has provided record support to Australian households and businesses to cushion the blow and to build a bridge to the other side of this crisis. Last night's budget set out the next stage of our economic plan as we move to the recovery phase of this crisis. This plan enables Australians to look to the future with confidence and with hope. Today I want to outline why the measures in last night's budget are the right ones at the right time to help get hundreds of thousands of Australians back into a job, and how this plan will rebuild the Australian economy and make it more stronger and more productive into the future. COVID-19 has tested our health system and our economy. Through swift and decisive action on the health front and our world-class health system, Australia has achieved one of the best health outcomes in this crisis among any of the other countries in the world. As we have seen overseas, without the strong health measures put in place to contain the spread of the virus and the actions and sacrifices of so many Australians, many more lives would have been lost. Our economic response to the crisis has also meant that we've avoided the fate of so many other nations, and we have performed better than so many other advanced economies. Had we not responded the way we have, we would have seen cascading job losses and business closures across the country. Our response softened the blow. It kept Australian businesses in business and Australians in jobs. Our actions put a floor under the economy. JobKeeper has been the centrepiece of our initial response. It has been an economic lifeline for around 3.5 million Australians employed in over 900,000 businesses. When the JobKeeper payment was announced, consumer confidence increased for 9 consecutive weeks. Along with our other response measures, we were able to replace much of the income that was lost when the health restrictions hit. In the June quarter, overall household disposable income rose by 2.2%. The average income of our lowest income households increased by 20% between the March and the June quarters. As the Deputy Governor of the Reserve Bank said recently, the fact that household incomes rose in the quarter does not mean that the stimulus was overdone. Absent the stimulus, he said, the decline in GDP and employment would have been significantly larger. Without these initial and urgent measures, 700,000 more Australians would have lost their job, and 200,000 Australian businesses would have run out of cash by the end of the year. Many would have had to close their doors, and many would never have reopened. Unlike most other advanced economies, Australia did not have a double-digit contraction in economic growth in the first half of this year. And already, there are signs that the Australian economy is fighting back. Businesses are reopening their doors and people are getting back to work. Of the 1.3 million people that lost their job or were stood down and saw their working hours reduced to zero in the early weeks of this crisis, some 760,000 of them are now back at work. As restrictions continue to ease across the country, we need to ensure that our policies are supporting and accelerating the recovery. Our crisis response policies were the right ones to get us to this point. In Treasury's review of the JobKeeper program in June, they found that the JobKeeper program has a number of features that create adverse incentives which may become more pronounced over time as the economy recovers, dampening the incentives to work, hampering labour mobility and the reallocation of workers to more productive roles. And it keeps businesses afloat that would not be viable without ongoing support. So with our economy reopening, Our policies are transitioning away from JobKeeper, which is scheduled to end in March. Our policies, as outlined in the budget last night, are designed to get Australians back to work and to rebuild our economy. Last night's budget outlined the next phase of our plan, with just under $100 billion of new COVID-19 health and economic response measures. This government's first, this government's second, this government's third priority is to get Australians back to work. The history of recessions is that unemployment rises rapidly but falls slowly, and that is the lesson of Australia's experience. Following the recession in the 1990s, it took nearly 10 years for the unemployment rate to return to pre-recession levels. For younger Australians, it took a remarkable 15 years. 15 years for young Australians to get back to the employment levels that they were prior to the recession in the 1990s. This time, we are striving to do better. The quicker we get people back to work, the stronger our economic recovery will be. There can be no economic recovery without a jobs recovery, and there can be no budget recovery without a jobs recovery. This is why jobs was the centre of last night's budget. Our economic recovery plan creates jobs in three key ways. First, it grows the economy by continuing to support spending and aggregate demand. Second, it supports businesses, making it easier for them to invest, to innovate, and to hire. And third, it provides incentives for Australians to get back into jobs and to take up new opportunities. We are creating jobs by putting more money into the pockets of everyday Australians who can spend that money in their local communities. Household consumption represents more than half of the Australian economy. So we need households to have more money in their pockets and the confidence to spend that money. Our economic recovery plan will see billions of dollars in additional support flow into the pockets of Australian households and families. This will see disposable income continue to remain above pre-COVID levels, even as our temporary crisis support measures are gradually unwound. More than 11 million Australians will directly benefit from $17.8 billion in income tax relief. This is the third year in a row that the government has delivered lower taxes for Australians. We have brought forward stage 2 of our legislated personal income tax plan by 2 years, and we've extended the low and middle income tax offset for an additional year. Australians will receive up to $2,745 for individuals and $5,490 for a couple in tax relief compared to 2017-18. More than 7 million Australians will receive more than $2,000 in tax relief this year as a result of our tax plan. The majority of the benefits for 2021 will go to those on incomes below $90,000. And more money in Australians' pockets means more spending. Whether it's spending at your local grocer, at your local mechanic, your local cafe, or a weekend retreat or getaway, more spending means more sales means more jobs. As sales increases in our local businesses, business confidence will improve, and this will encourage them to invest and create more jobs, creating a virtuous cycle across the Australian economy. Treasury estimates that the personal income tax relief from this budget will create an additional 50,000 jobs by the end of 2021-22. And we're providing an additional $2.6 billion for economic support payments totalling $500 in 2 payments to pensioners and a range of other eligible income recipients, including veterans, carers, those on family tax benefits. This will support senior Australians at a particularly challenging time, and it will further support our economic recovery. Secondly, we are creating more jobs by enabling businesses to innovate, to invest, to hire and to grow. For businesses both small and large, the outlook does remain uncertain. Some will be weighing up whether to keep their doors open, make a new investment, or to hold back until the outlook is clearer. Some will be deciding whether to give a school leaver a job and their first start in life. The measures I announced last night are designed to tip the balance in favour of that business hiring a young person. It's also designed to tip the balance in favour of new investment and further innovation by these small, medium and larger sized businesses. Our economic recovery plan includes the most significant incentives ever provided for Australian businesses to invest. They will improve the viability of Australian businesses and create jobs across the economy. Our unprecedented investment incentives will be available to 99% of all businesses that together employ around 11.5 million Australian workers. It will allow these businesses to immediately deduct the value of business assets that they purchase. Our temporary loss carryback measure will be available to companies employing millions of Australians. Working together, these incentives will create a powerful driver for businesses to make a positive decision, to bring forward their investment plans, to receive the cash flow support now and to grow their business. As these businesses grow, they will need more Australian workers. Treasury estimates that our business tax incentives will see 50,000 additional workers in a job by 2020-21. At the same time, we're also making it easier for businesses to do business, become more competitive and take advantage of new and emerging opportunities. We're lowering energy costs through our gas-fired recovery package by investing $1.9 billion as well in other new, emerging and renewable technologies. We're providing funding to accelerate the delivery of important transmission projects that lower energy prices and create a more stable grid. We're also cutting red tape to reduce costs and make businesses more dynamic. This includes automatic mutual recognition of occupational licences and registration between states that state and federal governments have been working on for a decade or more, which is now coming to fruition. Faster and improved services for farmers and businesses who export agricultural products. Mandating e-invoicing for Commonwealth agencies, which will then lead states to follow suit, and then we'll see it rolled out across the broader economy. And I'm investing in fast-tracking environmental assessments, not lowering standards, but ensuring that business can undertake these major infrastructure spends in a faster and more effective manner. And our recently announced insolvency reforms, the most significant in 3 decades, will give small businesses that do face difficulties every opportunity to restructure and to keep more workers in place and to stay afloat and see through this crisis. The credit reforms we announced are the most significant too in a decade, and they will remove unnecessary barriers to accessing credit so that consumers can continue to spend and can continue to invest and create jobs. These changes and many, many other changes are all contained in the budget, and they will reduce costs for Australian businesses, encouraging them to hire, to innovate and to grow. Thirdly, we are creating jobs by helping to equip workers with the skills that they need to find work. We have established the $1 billion Jobs Trainer Fund, which will support up to 340,000 additional free or low-fee training places in areas of genuine need to help upskill and to retrain job seekers. The Job Trainer Fund will ensure job seekers of all ages remain engaged and have the opportunity to acquire skills which will help them get a job. At the same time, we do need to do more to help young people as job seekers get into the employment market. Young Australians have been disproportionately affected by this COVID-19 recession. Employment for young Australians remains